the importance of doing your part, whatever your part may be. If it's teaching piano lessons like Mrs. Buckner did, or teaching us about rocketry like Mr. Denny did. Okay, none of these people are getting paid anything real, but what they wanted to do was impart to our generation and create an impression of me and the kids that I grew up with about who we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to do.
But everybody has an important role, and it's some to litigate, some to educate, some to donate, some to just agitate, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Everybody kind of has a role.
Founder, chairman, and CEO of Vista Equity Partners, one of the largest software investors in the entire world with over $100 million in assets under management. Why don't we start with your book? It's called Lead Boldly, that features your insights on 7 principles of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
He's ringing the closing bell today after a quarter century of making his mark on the industry as a leading software investor.
You're a very smart guy. You just have your heritage to overcome in order to be successful in business.
Good evening, Howard. That every vote is counted, that every voice has spoken.
Vice President Biden has a responsibility to not make things worse.
There should have absolutely been a reflected amount of contractors that the community actually represents, because that actually creates sustainability. And say, okay, well, how do you drive economic activity? I believe in the small entrepreneur. I believe in ensuring that they get financing.
We have to start at. So I told you the Katrina part. The part we really have to start at is the World's Fair of '84. It was done right. Every black business was participating. All of those businesses, and I can think back
They didn't get paid?
They did not get paid, but more importantly,
Wow.
they were promised that they were going to get paid. And now we have another generation of young black entrepreneurs that are doing it, and they're doing it well. Well, Robert, good to have you here, Baldwin Books. It's been a long time.
Good to see you.
Good to catch up. I get to see what you're doing. I don't get to ask you how you're doing it, but the success shows everywhere, and I'm sure it's because of the hard work and preparation you put in everything. So good to be here with you.
Yeah, you too, brother. Been too long.
Yes.
Good to see you. Looking well.
Something I've always wanted to talk to you about.
Sure.
If you remember, we both received an award at Morehouse College. You received the Candle in the Dark. I received the Benny Award, which is the highest award that Morehouse gives out. And after that, I saw that you were a graduation speaker, which I thought was amazing. But then you decided to pay the student loans off for that entire graduating class.
Yeah.
And then doubled back and said you'd pay the student loans off for their parents also. What was your thought process? Like, when did you decide that? When you were up speaking, when you saw the kids, or was it something that, you had been thinking about for a while?
So my first real time on Morehouse's campus was when you and I were there. And if you recall, they had the reception before and all that. And they said, oh, let's get in the car and let's go drive over to the theater. I said, no, let's walk. I want to walk. I want to feel this campus. And so, Dr. Thomas and I, we were walking and I'm just kind of meandering through. And I said, well, and I saw a dilapidated building.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, what's that? And dilapidated apartment building. He said, oh, yeah. I said, it's some guy owns that building. He won't sell it to us. And he wants the kids to be reminded of, in essence, that poverty. And that bothered me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of meandered our way through and went to the award ceremony. And I gave him a call back. I said, hey, tell me a little bit more about the nature of that owner of that building. He said, yeah, we've been, we tried to buy it, this and that. And I said, oh, okay. So I understood the psychology that the owner wanted to continue to reinforce of our young minds, which is just completely wrong. And so I said, all right, let me figure out a way to go buy that building. And so got a nice little holding company to make the approach. He had no idea who it was and, paid more than a reasonable amount to buy the building and then leveled it and then made a park, made a walking park that was then designed by some of the students there. Mm-hmm. And in that process, I started to understand a little bit more about that generation of students at Morehouse. And I would ask, okay, well, what are they doing? What are their careers? What are their career aspirations? Tell me about, when you see, a student going from freshman year to senior year, their journey. How many of them have to leave college for a period of time because they can't afford tuition or room or board or books or whatever it might be? And it's a very high level. And then when I looked at those who, were graduating, the amount of student debt that they had. And when you look at that, and then I, of course, kind of double click down a little bit more. So, okay, well, what kind of jobs do they get at the end? And what's kind of the income ratio to the debt ratio? When you do a little bit more work and you figure out that 65% of the wealth in the African-American community goes to paying back student loans, which is an astounding figure when you really think about it. And you're like paying back student loans to the U.S. government, which is a whole nother thing. Right. Start thinking about, why are African-Americans having to pay back the U.S. government for education when they were deprived of it for hundreds of years? Right. And so those are the things that were rattling around in my mind for that year. So then, made a few very discreet inquiries about, well, how much debt do these kids have? Tell me about the nature of where they're going. And what you figure out, a couple things. One, these students, and I like to say it this way, have done the lift. They have invested in themselves or their parents or their grandparents. Often, I think it's 62%, whatever the number might be, of those students were first generation going to college. Point number one. All of them, well, for the most part, almost all of them had some form of student loan dynamic. Often it was a parent or grandparent mortgaging the family house to send this one child to school. The promise of hope in that young man. And I look at that and say, okay, part of what our job is, I'm going to say this where don't take it offensively, as an elder in our community, is to think about ways that we can contribute to our community uniquely. We all can do certain things, but some of us can do only a certain number of things. You're an expert in life. Right. You can do unique things in your community that others can't do. I have to be pretty good at finance and a couple other things, right? So I can uniquely do some things in my community. And so when I thought about it, I underwrite scholarships all over the world, basically. When I thought about it, I said, when you underwrite a scholarship, you're placing some hope in some respects in someone that they will fulfill some potential. But if you clear someone's debt, and it's a debt that they have already invested in themselves, their family has invested in themselves, that should liberate their potential even more. And so that was the thought behind it. And as you know, it was kind of interesting. I didn't want to say it in advance because, you say something like that in advance and it can dilute the efficacy of it in some respects. And part of what I wanted to do, like all things, is lead the Morehouse class, and I say this, of alums to now say, oh, this is a great idea. We should be doing more of that for for other people who have the capacity to do that. And some are followed. And so that's why I saved it for the end of my speech. Plus, I wanted to hear my speech.
Right.
And delivered it at the end of the speech. As a testament to my belief in their capacity as African-American men to make a change and pay it forward, which is what I asked them to do. Their job is to pay it forward in their community in the way that they feel best. Plain and simple.
Well, it reminds me of me so much in terms of when I finished law school. I thought about, do I want to be a civil rights lawyer? And I thought about all the paths that I could take.
Yeah.
But part of the equation you have to do is, what does it pay? And will I be able to afford to pay my law school loan back?
Right.
And so I didn't become a civil rights lawyer. In fact, I wound up getting in politics way too early. But it was something I was thinking about. So when you liberate and create that freedom for kids to go just follow their dreams without being saddled with the responsibility of paying back that debt, it allows them to, in my opinion, pursue their dreams, use their God-given talent, and do amazing things. And I just thought that it was something I saw, and it actually inspired me to do something. And a lot of people around here don't know, but I went home. My mother was appointed by the governor to sit on Southern University's board.
Oh, yeah.
So my brother and I, we did an endowed scholarship in her name.
Excellent.
So that a kid from her hometown and a kid from my dad's hometown could go to Southern University, because my mother is from the poorest place in America. She had 15 brothers and sisters. When she went off to college, she was sharing a jacket with her sister who lived 90 miles away. I don't understand how you share a jacket over 90 miles. My dad came from a wealthy family. My grandfather owned a funeral home. He owned land. He owned cattle and hotel, rental property, all of that good stuff. So my dad went to college freshman year with a new car, a deuce and a quarter. My mother went sharing a jacket.
Sharing a jacket,
They met at Southern. It was the great equalizer. And I always tell people, they graduated at the same time. And finally, my mother was like, Cedric, you need to stop telling that lie. I said, what? I was like, what are you talking about? She was like, your daddy had to go to summer school. I graduated first.
Yeah, right. Of course, right. Yeah.
So, but watching what you did and the impact it did, I said, you know what? I want a kid. And her hometown is still the poorest place in America. We're gonna invest in a kid there every year. And then my dad's hometown now, Prentice, Mississippi, they're having significant challenges. So we wanted to do a kid from both schools. So my brother and I, we raised some money, we gave some money. So we put $500,000 in it just to do that. And so it's important. And my mother's tickled to death. She just drove in the drive to Lake Providence. It's about 4 hours, but she just drove up, at the beginning of the school year to give the scholarship away.
Get to meet the kids?
Meet the kids, spend time with them. So
that's beautiful.
it was, but you inspired us to do that. And my brother's a Morehouse graduate. And of course I'm a Morehouse graduate. So we took the challenge seriously. And I think the Morehouse community did.
They did. And I see it. And everywhere I go, the Morehouse men are like, okay, here's what I'm doing. Here's what we're doing. Which is, part of, I always say, it's part of growing up in a Black community. The arc of life. I grew up in an all Black neighborhood. My guess is you grew up in an all Black neighborhood. And we had people in that neighborhood who provided what I call different aspects of what make up a beloved community. Both of my parents were teachers. We had neighbors who were dentists. We had neighbors who were, because it's all Black community. So you get the full stratum. Right. People who had contracting businesses. The lieutenant governor lived across the alley. The state representatives lived across the street. And then you had people who owned corner store. So it was that dynamic. And so you always had I always felt this way, a complete ecosystem in our community. And you didn't know what existed in other communities until you went out of your community, and then, my year of going into first grade, forced busing for the first time to desegregate the schools. And so now all of a sudden I'm bus across town. Well, this is one of those stories I tell, but right before that was to happen, they got all the buses ready, some racists went and blew up the buses. And so as a result, in my neighborhood, we were supposed to get 3 or 4 buses. We only got 1. Okay, the kid in my neighborhood, bus number 13, just so happened to be a bus that ended up on my corner, the end of the block. And it's interesting to see kind of social experiment. So you think about these social experiments, that Morehouse gift is one type. We're one bus. Now, rather than everybody in the neighborhood going to the other school, only the group that could fit onto that bus. When I look at that group, almost everyone is a professional. And relative to even the block away, much lower percentage, much, much, much lower percentage, like a 10th. Because, these are people I grew up with, so I know where they are and what they've done and all that sort of stuff, right? And a lot has to do with going to a better resource school, being in an environment where you had the reinforcements of what's important. Because you're on the bus every day as a little kid. You got the second grader, the third grader, the fourth grader, sixth grader, all impressing upon you the importance of doing well in school. And you come home on the bus and, your parents went home because they were at work. And so you'd stay at, Mrs. Brown's house, whoever's house it might be. And those older kids would tutor the younger kids.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you think about it, everybody contributed to the fabric. And so that kind of impresses upon you the importance of doing your part, whatever your part may be. If it's teaching piano lessons like Mrs. Buckner did, or teaching us about rocketry like Mr. Denny did. Okay, none of these people are getting paid anything real, but what they wanted to do was impart to our generation of African-American children knowledge, skills, passion, love, joy of life in music, in art, and science, or whatever it might be. And I think, and in values about working hard and progressing. And so those are the things that kind of, create the impression and create impression of me and the kids that I grew up with about who we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to do. Right. So every person, when we talk about the beloved community, has a role. Sometimes your role is just to make sure that that kid whose parent doesn't come home in time is safe, is well fed, and is read to. And then when you figure out what their talent might be, okay, it might be to help them express that talent, help them get a new instrument, help them, train in some area that they may be particularly gifted in or may have an interest in. And I think that's part of being part of community.
Oh, absolutely. It reminds me of a story that Jim Clyburn tells all the time. That, it was a Sunday, he was tired, but they were going to have a sit-in at a lunch counter. And he was like, okay, I have a test tomorrow, but I'm going to go do it. So they sit in, they all get arrested. And he's in the cell with one of his friends. His friend's like, why Mr. Brown? He never gets arrested. We're the only ones. We get arrested every time. Mr. Brown never gets arrested. So he goes on. And Jim finally turns to him and said, look, man, Mr. Brown's job and his role is to collect the money so he can bail us out.
Right.
He said, but the bad thing is Mr. Brown is down there in his cell because I don't think we're getting out. So Mr. Brown got arrested that day. And instead of them spending 8 or 10 hours, they wind up spending 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of times I tell kids, I'm like, look, everybody plays a role. And play the role as best you can because everybody's role is important. Leah Chase from the great Dookie Chase restaurant down here, world renowned, and she's getting an award in D.C. from the Restaurant Association. She said, look, I learn every day from the people in my kitchen. One day, busboy came up and said, why do you put the cherries in the lemonade? Nobody eats them. They clog up the dishwasher, and it just takes a lot of time. And she said, I learned I should take the cherry out of the lemonade. And it made us more efficient, and it was a better product. And sometimes the dishwasher will come to me and say, hey, I don't know what's going on. I'm not a chef, but nobody's eating the peas today. And she realizes she needs to do quality check of the peas.
Yeah, so it's a fees, yeah.
So I say that to say, one, we can learn from everybody, but everybody has an important role. And it's some to litigate, some to educate, some to donate, some to just agitate. But it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Everybody kind of has a role. So,
and you have to, part of, I think, the challenge, and we'll talk about it, I think, hopefully, is to make sure people embrace their role.
Yes.
Okay, or embrace a role.
Right.
Okay, because too often, the apathy or, we have enabled ourselves through devices to remove ourselves from being active members and participants in the community. And because you can kind of participate from afar and not do much but comment, okay, on the one hand, as opposed to truly, that generation, the generation that enabled us to be educated everywhere we wanted or anywhere we wanted. Think about that, okay? That generation that enabled us to live where we wanted, to get a mortgage where we wanted, to actually have access to be a retiree with a pension. That generation put their bodies out there in the line.
It was their blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yep. Their physical self. And now we see generations. I was Google, they may text or comment or whatever. I was actually quite encouraged at the time of the murder of George Floyd, how these young people did not wait. And people our generation actually sat and observed. These young people, because I saw my kids.
Right.
Oh, no, no. And they got up, and it was COVID. They got up and got out the house and put on their mask and said, this cannot stand. And I was like, wow, okay. Our generation, I think, had lost some of that, put your body out there in that way that my parents' generation, I mean, they would get up and protest in a minute. And I remember standing out there with my mom and dad holding signs.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was on the picket line with my mother, who was a teacher.
Yeah.
But I was on the picket line with her at 5.
Right.
She was a strike captain, and they said, if any one person is here, the food workers won't bring the food.
Right.
So before she brought us to school,
Yeah.
she would take us with her. She would be out there on the picket line by herself.
Yeah.
And when other teachers got there, she would then bring us to school.
Yeah.
And that's the hard work. That's about showing up.
Yeah.
And that's about, not only being present, but actually risking something
Right.
in person.
Right.
With your name.
Yeah.
And, you talk about the beloved community. I went to a high school in New Orleans, Ben Franklin, which at the time was the 5th best public school in the country. And people would run up to me and as I started getting elected and doing all other things, well, you went to Ben Franklin, famous high school. Who's your favorite teacher? Who made the biggest impact on you? And I always laugh, and they say, well, what's so funny? I said, a guy named Greg Bryan. Okay. Every day at school, he would gravitate to me when I was walking in. He would either say, pull up your pants or tuck your shirt in or straighten up. Or he'd say, Cedric, you had a bad game last night. Let's go in the gym and shoot. Or whatever it was, I would look to him and look forward to seeing him.
Yeah.
Like, well, what did he teach? I was like, he was the head custodian.
Yeah.
And
he taught you, right?
He's Greg Bryan. His little brother went to Georgetown to play basketball, but he was a solid black man.
Yeah.
Who knew I had talent, but also knew I was not focused,
right,
inspired,
right,
or nor did I desire to use all my talent. And it was his role to say, you're better than this.
Yeah.
And so.
And he said it.
Oh,
he
absolutely.
wasn't afraid to say it.
He was not afraid to say it. And then that started me to coaching. And so, it's just funny. And you see how the people who sow into you, how you respond, and it lingers for the rest of your life.
Oh, absolutely.
And so
it creates that impression.
That's it.
And then it defines who you really are.
Absolutely.
Because you embrace the values that they brought into your life or exposed you to. And then sometimes, of course, you have to reject certain of them.
Yep.
But that's the beauty of being a part of a diverse community. Diverse in it may be the same, skin tone,
right,
but diverse in ideology and thoughts. I mean, a lot of people think, Black communities are homogeneous in thought and political. No, not my neighborhood.
Not even close. Not in my family. My 2 stepbrothers were Republicans.
Yeah. We sit and I crack up sometimes. Family events and my brother and my mom are yelling and don't want to take pictures together. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's because, you got in political ideology.
Right.
Right. But that's an important thing that we have to acknowledge is we do have different points of view and ideology, and it's okay to talk and disagree. Sometimes we don't take family pictures, but usually I do that because, somebody's cheating at spades, but that's
absolutely,
but that's real. You gotta enforce that the right way. But, the political ideology stuff or aspects of how you think about where we need to go as a community, and I love that. My parents being teachers, part of a teaching community, there was always a gathering in the house talking about something that needs to change in the school system, in the city, in the, and I just grew up with that. I mean, that was just the nature of how we lived. And that's what I call the impression that I understood is you can make a difference. I'm gonna tell one story that my father, he was an elementary school principal, and just like my mother was a school teacher, when they went and had the strikes for, better wages for the teachers. And my dad was like one of the only Black principals, administration, think about it. And he was on the picket line with them. And that was a whole front page.
I can imagine.
Black principal, what side with the labor, with union, with, you know what I mean, all that sort of stuff. And, my dad was getting, by the administration, kind of blackballed around it. But he's like, well, this is what's right. Okay, so you see those things. But I also saw him use the fact that he was in administration and had access to City Hall. It was at the time, they used to grew up in Denver, fourth generation in Denver, Colorado. A lot of snow in the wintertime. And what we would find, there'd be a snowstorm. And we kids would celebrate because we'd have snow days off. We'd be at home 3 days. They put one strike 3 days later down the road, the main, thoroughfare. And then people could finally get and go to bus stops and get to work and all that. So people missing work and not getting paid. Well, my dad, and then, of course, as a kid, I started noticing when we get on the bus and then go across town, we get to their streets. Their streets not only were paved, but they were dry, which means that they were paved 2 days ago, 3 days ago, the whole street. And so it now dried. And so my dad was like, oh, no, because, you're actually impacting the economic condition of our community because a lot of people were wage earners. And you don't go to work, you're not getting paid, plain and simple. And so he went and formed a North City Park Civic Association, and they went down and fought for that. So at a minimum, the day it snowed, we at least got that one line down the street so people could actually get to work. And so it's kind of interesting to see while he was a teacher, part of what he was able to do was he had access, I call it City Hall, to actually make changes in the community. It wasn't part of his purview, but he realized that was his responsibility.
That's what leaders do.
Yeah, That's what leaders do, right? So those are, again, when I think about that, those are things that, when we talk about what inspires you to do stuff, it's understanding that's, your responsibility.
Yep.
Because you are able to do it. And not everybody in your community is able to do it. But everybody has to step up and play their role.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And, you see it in sports. You see it in the community. You see it in families. And it's just an important role. And look, I started at a young age, but I've seen it probably at every level of anything I've ever done.
Yeah.
And everywhere I go, I still always think of, whether it was my grandfather or Greg Bryant in the back of my head saying, you really can do better, Cedric. Stop goofing off.
Yeah.
You can do better. But, and look, I really believe I live in the best city in the world. We're resilient. We get knocked down. We get back up.
Yeah.
We party after funerals to celebrate life. We have a very unique culture, but it's rooted in love of community and love of family, love of self. And, I just love it down here.
How'd you decide that it was your calling to represent your community in Washington? How did that come up?
I got in and out of politics the same way. And I just thought about the out of politics when you brought it up. I was coaching Little League. And so I lived across the street from a playground. My mother was a teacher. My dad was a lab tech, and he owned a nightclub. But he died when I was 7. And my mother would tell us, when you get off the bus from school, do your homework, go across the street to the park. So we participated in every sport. We did our sports by the season.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's what we did.
Yeah.
And those coaches became my mentors. And so when I turned 16, they said, well, we don't have teams you can play on anymore.
Right.
But you have to go coach this team.
Yeah.
So I was 16 coaching a 13-year-old team. We go places. They're like, who's the coach? I was like, I am. They're like, no, you're not.
You would let the player. Yeah.
And I was like, well, we're going to sit here a long time because I am the coach. And so I coached when I went to Morehouse. I came home in the summers so that I could coach. Then at Tulane, I picked Tulane Law School. It was a great law school, but I wanted to be back in New Orleans so I could continue coaching. And my last year of law school, I coached this team with Biko and Ryan and all these kids, Roy, all of these kids on it that I just fell in love with. First day of practice, and I used to run the Little League. So first day of practice, I saw them last year. They finished in 5th place.
Yeah.
We're practicing. And I said, okay. I brought them up at the end of practice. I brought their parents up. I said, look, there's no reason you all shouldn't win this league. I said, in fact, I'm watching you all. You better not lose a game. You're that good. I said, I will teach you what you need to know. If you win every game, I'll buy you new uniforms for the championship. But if you lose, I'm going to bust your butts. and they won every game.
Yeah.
They won the championship.
Ship the expectation.
I kept my word. I bought them new uniforms. And then they called me a little bit later. That was during the summer. But then they called me later. They said, well, we don't have a basketball coach. I said, whoa, I'm back in school.
Right.
Keep looking. If you can't find a coach, call me back in 2 weeks. So, of course, they don't look. They call me back in 2 weeks. I wind up coaching.
Look everywhere.
Right. Well, we wind up winning the world championship in bitty basketball. And I was at the dinner table complaining to my mother that every uniform they had, and when we would eat after games, I was either using my law school loan money or my mom and dad's small electrical contracting business. They were paying for it. And my mother, I guess in jest a little bit, she was like, well, if you don't like it, do something about it.
Yeah.
So then I started asking, well, who's the state rep?
Okay.
Nobody knew. Come to find out, beautiful woman, different philosophy, but she was a 13-year incumbent. I decided a year out of law school, I took my grandfather's inheritance that he left me, went by signs, and came back, and I said, Mom, look, I'm in it. I'm running for office. She was like, you doing what? By that time, I already spent $10,000. So then it was
Too late to go back.
I was like, my brother, I need money from you. Mom, I need money from you. And then I won.
Yeah.
And I stayed active in the community, stayed coaching, stayed making sure that our kids had the resources.
Yeah.
What was important for me is I didn't want our kids going to other playgrounds from other communities and their kids have nice stuff and our kids didn't. And then they think less of themselves. Nobody loves them. So that's why that was important for me. And so I spent my time in the legislature. Then Katrina happened. And I realized that the federal government is where,
again, right?
2006.
No,
That's where they print money. Our recovery was based on what they did. So I ran for office. I lost the first time, ran for Congress again, and I won. And, stayed really in touch with those kids. And I say it's how I got out also. I left Congress, went to the White House, and President Biden and I were about to go somewhere. So we get on Marine One, we're leaving the White House, and he leans over and he says, Cedric, I have an important question for you. I said, what, Mr. President? How's little Cedric? I said, little Cedric just told me last weekend that he's living his best life. I said, but that's not the question. He said, well, what's the question? I said, ask me how I'm doing. I said, I'm effing miserable. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, Mr. President, I work in the White House, steps from the Oval Office. But I went home this weekend and I saw Ryan, who I coached when he was 8. He now has kids and he's coaching. And I realized that Cedric's 8 years old and I never coached him. That can't stand.
Yeah.
He looked me dead in my eyes. He said, you got to go home.
Yeah.
He said, you can't go home right now
Yeah.
because you're going to see an announcement in a day.
Yeah. But you're going to have to go home.
And you're going to stay through that. And that announcement was Breyer was stepping down.
Yeah.
And we had to find a replacement. And we found Ketanji. But he said, look, I've gotten to know you on the campaign trail. I know you. I know how important Cedric is. I know how important coaching is to you. And that's how I got out of the White House.
Yeah.
I said, I need to go home,
Right.
coach my son.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. But the coaching part of it, I love because I can set expectations for kids and that are very, very high, but give them the support
and
to help them
make those steps,
to help them reach it. And it's almost like the same way up at Morehouse. That Morehouse holds a crown over your head and expects you to grow into it.
Yeah.
And that's what I did with coaching. That's why, I see our little kids and they have so much talent. But not enough of them have either the resources or the environment or the support to live out their God-given talent. And that's what drives me most of the time. And especially it's focused on young Black men. And that every day, that's what I think about. And that's what I worry about. And we now have a scholarship at the state level that they named after. And we give $1,000 scholarships to Black kids that are going to university. And so,
excellent.
So we just try to, in our own little small way, do it, but there's a great intersection between politics, and it's really not an intersection. I mean, voting is the right which all other rights stem from.
Right.
And who's in office makes a tremendous difference on community. It's not about skin color. It's not about party.
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time that my P's that don't define me are politics, profit. It's purpose that defines what I do. And, hopefully I'll continue to do that.
You think he'll go back and serve at the will of the people?
I doubt it. Election day, I was depressed before the results because Kamala talked to me and said that if she won, I had to go back into the White House. And
you were depressed because you had to get.
And I literally was depressed. I went get in the bed under the covers.
Yeah.
And then they called to say,
just when I get out there,
Plan B. But I'm not a fan of what I see right now.
Okay.
But I want to help good people get elected. I'm not arrogant enough to think it has to be me. I don't mind helping people, but I am in desperate search of who's going to be that inspiring.
If you were back, roll time back, White House, and you could not make one thing happen, then what would it be?
I would have extended the child tax credit, made it permanent. We couldn't afford to make it permanent. And look, you talked about spades. We had 49 Democrats and 2 possibles. And the bold things that we wanted to do, we would get hindered. But if we were able, and we did it during COVID, so families around the country got an extra $600 for each kid. And that lifted 59% of Black kids out of poverty in 1 year.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And so I just wish we would have held the line to say if it's not permanent, we're not doing anything. And
why didn't, or why couldn't, or why wasn't?
Mansion, cinema. They were just very conservative. And I just thought that we had an opportunity to do something that would be game-changing.
There's communities in particular I thought would have been affected positively by this.
Manchin's community would have made a humongous difference. Absolutely.
I've been there.
It's one of the poorest districts
I know.
in the country. And
interesting.
And but I will tell you, working in the White House, it's just special. And we did some things that people didn't do. We went down to Tulsa for the 100th anniversary of Black Wall Street, the massacre, and met with 3 of the living survivors.
Yeah.
So those types of things made your day.
Yeah.
But dealing with...
Unfortunately, the reparations for that, my clan comes from there.
Up from Oklahoma.
One of my clan actually owned the pool ball, and one owned the 5 and dime and got burned out. That's how we ended up from Oklahoma to Pueblo, Colorado. I'm 4th generation.
Is that what John Rogers?
Yeah.
Also?
John Rogers' great-great-grandfather ran the hotel, but he was also a financier. So he would actually finance these small businesses. And they basically, same sort of deal. You can't come back. So that's why they ended up in Chicago. Our clan ended up in Colorado, Southern Colorado.
Wow. That was the trip that I put the most into. It was Biden's best written speech. Delivery didn't happen because he saw friends in the crowd. He saw Jesse Jackson, like in the middle of one of the best lines in the speech. He was like, "Hey, Jesse."
Yeah.
But seeing what happened and raising the attention, I mean, I don't mind saying it because I don't profess to be perfect, but before I got to the White House, I didn't know that story.
I'm blown away by that. I grew up with it.
Did not know it.
Yeah. So it was amazing to me. I went back east to school.
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, I didn't know people didn't know they were Black cowboys. That's the first thing. Okay. And I'm like, where y'all been? I mean, I grew up with, Bill Pickett.
Right.
I mean, these were people in our day-to-day psyche, not necessarily day-to-day conversation, but the day-to-day psyche. You knew about Black cowboy. We had the rodeos and, we all had cowboy. I mean, it was the nature of it. My ranch actually is now 106 years old, is the oldest African-American resort facility found by African-Americans called Lincoln Hills. And you look at this is how we grew up. The guy who founded it, his wife was my grandmother's best friend. My dad spent every summer there growing up, every summer. He took me there first when I was 6 months old. And so that was the nature. So black cowboys. And then you heard about, oh man, Tulsa, Greenwood, and what happened. And remember, you got to remember, a lot of folks didn't want to talk about it out loud because remember, they were criminalizing the black people who left.
Right.
John Rodder's great-grandfather, they were like, you come back and you're going to jail because you fought back. Think about that. So the blacks that did get out and scattered were like, I'm not going back, because they were criminalized for owning businesses and fighting back, people coming in invading their community.
That was one of the things that the three survivors talked to us about, was that it was just an unspoken rule that you just didn't talk about.
Of course not. Because, somebody come and knock on your house. Well, hang on a second. Where's your family coming?
Right. And you saw what they did the first time.
Yeah. Firebombed. Think about it. Cut the communication lines.
Mm-hmm.
People flew airplanes and firebombed the community. Firebomb. From the air.
Right.
Civilian on civilian.
And I just didn't know it. And that, I think he was the first, well, I don't think. He was the first president to go down to visit. But it just highlighted a story. And I was glad that we were able to uplift the story so a whole bunch of people would now know it. And after that, you realize that this was not a unique experience.
No.
It happened over and over again, especially in the South. And so, but it's part of our communities. We're resilient. Doesn't make it right. We're bouncing back from things that we shouldn't bounce back from. We're getting up from things we got knocked down by that it shouldn't have happened. But the other part of what I tell my kids is that we can't dwell on it. We have to spend every moment focusing on getting back up and achieving. And so
I always say, so Maya Angelou has a son by the name of Guy Johnson. Okay. Guy has written two of the best books that have ever been written. One's called Standing at the Scratch Line. The other one's called Echoes of a Distant Summer. Phenomenal books. There's hopefully have some copies here. I used to give hundreds of these away a year. And he has a line that says, racism is like gravity. Okay. You feel it every day, but you can't let it affect what you do, in essence. You got to
absolutely,
you just got to move through it. In this country, in this time. In this country, in this time. And that's just the reality. Mm-hmm. And so you have to move through it. And you have to enable your community to move through it and figure out what are the parts of the ecosystem that have to be supported. In some cases, it's political activity. In some cases, it's economic enablement. In some cases, it's education. In some cases, is physical protection, whatever it might be. In some cases, it might be ensuring that our mothers have maternal health and support so that our babies are born and born healthy. In some cases, it's education on diet and food. What are the things that kill Black people? Right. Mm-hmm. Often it's diet. It's hypertension, it's stress, it's A1C, diabetes, all those sorts of things, prostate cancer, right? Breast cancer, all those sorts of things. Okay, well, how do we, as leaders, go do something about that? Things we're doing in prostate cancer. I've got a van now that goes around and does prostate cancer tests. So that now I think now 25,000, 30,000 people get tested free. Okay, and in our communities, the bus that goes. Well, now we have a second one going on. I think a third one coming, but it goes in our community to do that testing, so that we can actually then we partner with clinics, Mount Sinai in New York, for instance. That now we can actually partner with a clinical service to now treat.
Right,
but thinking about what are the things that support a thriving community, and then how do you as a leader get engaged in that? And so when you sit back and you say, okay, you are now, continue to be a community leader here. What are the things that you would say, all right, here's what this community needs more of? I'm here today doing Kevin conversations at, Xavier and Dillard and all those sort of things. And I was like, okay, what do you all need more? Everybody says, more money. Well, sometimes that isn't necessarily all the cure. So besides more money, what are the things that this community, your family's been here how many generations?
My first generation, my mother and father both came from Mississippi and Lake Providence, and
Okay, so now,
kind of settled here because it was driving distance to both,
okay.
and sort of midway, and it was New Orleans.
Yeah.
So I think all of that did it. Look, I think it's a very interesting question, and I would say that it is our business infrastructure that is our most critical need. We have the talent, we have the ability. Sometimes we get the opportunity, and this is under Black leadership, white leadership. What typically happens is it's the same piece of pie, but they just divvy it up to different people depending on who wins in office.
Okay.
And so that
That piece of pie being federal or state or
local, I put it all in one chunk, state, federal, whatever the resources are that are coming down.
yeah.
And so you even look at it after Katrina, when we had to rebuild every school, $2.1 billion. Now, one school was built by an African-American contractor.
Oh, interesting.
In a 60%.
That should not have happened.
In a
Why?
60%
Why did that happen?
African-American.
Why did that happen that way? I'm asking because I don't know. You tell me. Why did the community let that happen?
The governor, over the objection of the Black Caucus, which I was the chair of, and a bunch of people came in and took control of New Orleans schools. They said the New Orleans schools were failing, and they took them over. The schools were never going to be the same school again, because you're never going to have the same student population or teacher population, because the city was empty and everybody was coming back.
Yeah.
So it was a money grab. But looking at that $2.1 billion.
Oh, yeah. Had it gone to contractors?
Had it gone to contractors, it's a game changer. And so,
yeah,
it's that focus that I think.
But beyond government stimulus, again, because, I have a different point of view. I agree with your point as to there should have absolutely been a reflected amount of contractors that the community actually represents, because that actually creates sustainability. I definitely look and say, okay, well, how do you drive economic activity? I believe in the small entrepreneur. I believe in ensuring that they get financing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And most
financing, bonding, all of that. And I guess the part we have to start at, so I told you the Katrina part, the part we really have to start at is the World's Fair of '84.
Okay.
It was done right. Every Black business was participating.
Okay.
World's Fair declared bankruptcy. All of those businesses, and I can think back
they didn't get paid?
They did not get paid, but more importantly,
I had not heard
they were promised that they were going to get paid. So I can just talk about my mom and dad.
Yeah.
They did a lot of the electrical work for a lot of the pavilions.
Okay.
And so trying to finish the job without being paid, you're floating payroll.
Right.
You're not paying your
workers.
You're matching taxes because you're paying your workers with that money. Yeah. And when that bankruptcy happened, it decimated.
Had no idea.
Decimated the Black business community, and I don't think it ever fully recovered from that. And now we have another generation of young Black entrepreneurs that are doing it, and they're doing it well.
Okay.
And so
the reliance, what I'm hearing you say, anytime there's a hyper reliance on an institution, a singular system as World's Fair, whatever that group was, or governmental, right, creates a high degree of volatility and outcome.
Right. And vulnerability.
Yeah, vulnerability versus diversifying, in essence, the sources of resources.
Right.
Right.
And so as we
small to medium.
As we create more developers in the city that are African American, that are from the community, then it creates more opportunity for those same businesses that are in the community.
Right.
And so we just have to really get into and focus on the development game. And I guess I look at it from the business side, because I really believe that economics drives everything else.
I agree.
And whether it's crime, whether it's education, it's hard and people blame Black women all the time for a whole bunch of stuff they have nothing to do with. But I think about my black mother. If she's making 70% of what a man makes, then she has to work 2 jobs. That means she's not home with me to help me with my homework. And then all of a sudden, when I go to school and I'm not prepared, they blame it on my mother while she's busy trying to keep a roof over my head, clothes on my back, and food on the table. And so that's that intersection between what government can do and what should be doing, which is leveling the playing field and creating opportunity, and where it faces the realities, and not theory anymore, but the realities of what's happening on the ground. And so, that's why I think that the business aspect in this city, and we're starting to get more people showing interest here, which is good. And I think that it will absolutely show in terms of the business talent that we do have here. And so we have a bunch of good people doing a bunch of good things. DJ here at Baldwin Books doing a phenomenal job, has credit union next door. And it's not about government stuff. It's about, this is how you get to where you want to be. And I'm going to help you get there. So, but we're getting the wrap sign. It's always fun to talk to you.
Yeah.
It's always,
Again.
it's always inspiring. I don't know what it's going to cause me to go do next, but whenever I talk to you or see you, it winds up costing me money.
It makes you money in the long run.
I hope so.
Yeah, this has been delightful. So good to see you.
Same here.
Yeah, let's keep making our communities more beloved.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll do that.
Good. Thanks.